Viewers, welcome back to the show. Now, tonight's topic is about opinion evidence, experts, when can you engage them, and we're very fortunate to have an expert tonight by the name of Ms. Tia Orton, Senior Forensic Engineer at DV Experts. Good evening, Tia.
Good evening. Thank you for having me.
Tia, tell us a bit about yourself, Tia.
Well, I have a bit of an interesting background. You might be able to hear my accent. I am from San Francisco originally. Started out my career actually in Detroit, of all places, working for General Motors, which is the parent company of Holden here in Australia. I then went and worked for an independent crash test lab in California, where we ran all sorts of different types of crash tests to evaluate vehicle safety. Mainly we were evaluating rollover safety, so a lot of rollover collisions that we were looking at, a lot of child safety seats, different types of collisions of all kinds. So people may not know this about Melbourne, but there's actually quite a large independent research company here where we do a lot of crash testing and evaluations of vehicle safety. So that's what I'm doing here in Australia.
Well, just on that point, we're going to be showing some vision to the viewers later on, which is very fascinating about the circumstances of this particular case that we're going to be doing tonight. We'll be doing a case study.
Yes.
On that point there, Don, do you want to tell us a bit about the facts of this case study we're going to be doing?
Sure. So this is a case that I understand DV were recently involved with. And I understand it involved a cyclist on the road, midday. It was a main road with tram lines and all that. And the next thing, they find the cyclist face down near some parked cars. And
He was unconscious also.
and sustained quite severe head injuries.
And Tia, what was significant and why you were engaged was because this particular cyclist had no memory of the event whatsoever.
Yes.
Could not in any shape or form assist his lawyers to determine what caused his accident.
That's correct.
Do you want to kick in and tell us what your role was?
Yes. Well, a little bit of background here in Melbourne with the tram lines, the parked cars on the side of the road. It's very difficult for cyclists to sort of negotiate that sort of terrain, having to go around parked cars, trams, and things like that. So a lot of times you'll have witnesses that will see things. You know, the cyclist involved might have a recollection of what happened. In this case, there was no recollection because there was actually quite a severe head trauma to the cyclist who was injured. So the background, basically, when the case comes to us as an expert, we had the evidence in this case was limited to just the helmet that was really worn by the cyclist, as well as the bicycle itself.
Can you show the viewers more or less where these fractures to the helmet were?
Yes. So this is a standard bike helmet, and I'm sure most of us have worn a bike helmet in our life. They're very light. Currently, they're usually made out of some form of light foam, maybe have a plastic coating. They're designed to fracture on impact, so that absorbs energy, and really what we're trying to do is protect the head, ideally. So what happened in this case, there was damage to both the front of the helmet and to the rear of the helmet. So we have very specific damage to two areas. And what that can tell us is directionality potentially about the impact that caused that damage.
Can I stop you there for a minute, Tia?
Yeah.
Viewers, the key to what we're talking about now is that this particular helmet had two fractures. So what it meant was there one impact or two? Now, Don, before we go back to Tia, what's the significance of trying to establish if a car hit Mr. B?
Well, if a car hit Mr. B, that's what we call him, then he has entitlements under the Transport Accident Act. Now, I understand in this case, they were alleging that he just fell off his bike.
That's right.
So if he fell off his bike without a vehicle involved, then he doesn't have any rights under the Transport Accident Act, so therefore doesn't get anything.
If Mr. B was hit by a motor vehicle,
Yes.
and the motor vehicle obviously didn't stop, and
Yes.
there's no way in the world, Tia, that the person that hit him, if he was hit by a motor vehicle, wouldn't have known.
Well, it's possible that he wouldn't have known, actually.
Really?
I think that's true. A lot of these large trucks with big, heavy wing mirrors, potentially you could, impact someone and maybe not know that you had impacted someone. So, not necessarily.
But Don, on a balance of probabilities, where the motor vehicle hasn't stopped, the rights of Mr. B could be quite significant at common law because he's taken off. There's no other version of events, is there?
So that's right. So he'll have a common law claim. He's got a serious injury, a significant head injury. And then on top of that, he'll have, besides his TAC in times of wages, medical expenses and a lump sum, he'll get a common law claim for damages if he can prove fault. And in cases where there is an unidentified vehicle, the TAC does pick up or doesn't indemnify that unidentified vehicle.
Okay. And so his entitlements could be quite significant.
That's right.
All right. Getting back to Tia. Tia, 2 fractures on the helmet.
That's right.
So that means in your eyes there might have been 2 impacts.
That's correct. And that was my original sort of hypothesis. And now with expert testimony, we're there to provide opinion evidence. And based on a lot of testing that we've done, and we've got videos of some testing that we've run in previous cyclist impacts, I was pretty confident that in order to create this type of fracture on both sides of the helmet, that it would have taken either 2 impacts, separate impacts, or some sort of compression in between 2 surfaces. In order to evaluate that hypothesis, we wanted to run some actual physical crash tests. Now, you can't run tests in every case, and sometimes it's not necessary to run tests, but if you have the opportunity to run testing, it's always a good thing in order to prove the hypothesis that you are making, which is essentially your opinion.
So essentially what you're trying to prove is that the 2 impacts was probably a mirror striking the back of a helmet that caused the first fracture, is that correct?
A mirror or any other object that was,
Protruding
into the area of the cyclist, yes.
And then the fracture at the front of the helmet when he struck the ground.
That's correct.
Okay.
And Tia, there wasn't much damage to the actual bike, was there? My understanding wasn't
There
much
wasn't. There was
at
almost
all.
no damage. That's right. And based on previous testing we've conducted, we know that you can have almost no damage even if you run over a bicycle tire with a vehicle, as some of the videos that we have done in testing show. So it's not necessarily, the lack of damage is not necessarily indicative of anything.
Well, Tony and Tia showed me some film before the show where it just showed a bicycle being run over by a car, and the bike was perfect, no damage, near no damage. So that's quite remarkable.
Well, what we're going to need to do is go to some of the testing you did, Tia, and also the conclusions and things like that. But we've got to go to a sponsors break, viewers, so please stay tuned, and we'll be back with some more of this intriguing story shortly.